I'll let the interpreters get in place. Good morning again. It gives me great pleasure to be with you. The first time I came to Turkey was in June 2005. And that was for the purpose of a conference on the optional protocol. And since June 2005, I think this is my 8th time to come to Turkey, and maybe my 4th or 5th time to come to Ankara, just to discuss this optional protocol. As my colleague Barbara Burnett mentioned, the APT has been working very hard on the optional protocol, and we work globally. We have colleagues doing work in New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, all the way in this direction towards Turkey and Western Europe. And I think the question we're asked the most often is, how is country X or country Y or country Z implementing the optional protocol? What type of mechanisms are being put in place? This is exactly why we've designed session 2, to give you an overview of what is happening, particularly in countries of the European Union. So what I'd like to do in this session, I am not only a moderator, I'm going to give a very short presentation to set the scene for the other discussions. And after me, we will have 3 representatives from the Czech Republic, France, and the United Kingdom, who will tell you how these countries are implementing this instrument and what sorts of national preventive mechanisms are being put in place. So, to answer this million-dollar question, how are countries implementing the OPCAT? Well, generally, within the Europe region, and probably globally as well, we see 4 broad trends. There are a number of countries which are creating one or more entirely new mechanisms for the purpose of implementation. Trend number 1. There's a larger number of countries who are designating one or more existing bodies, usually a national human rights institution or ombudsperson's office, Human Rights Commission, for example. A small number of countries are adopting a hybrid approach whereby a national human rights institution is being used in combination with representatives from civil society, whether individually or institutionally, as NGOs. And finally, we have a category which a number of countries don't easily fit into. So let's quickly look at the first trend, countries which are creating an entirely new body. I mean, the logic is very simple. They look at the mechanisms they have, they decided they don't have anything which is compliant with the OPCAT, so they decided to create a new body. Examples of this we have in France, Germany, Liechtenstein, Romania, and Switzerland, or countries where the process is beginning to establish such bodies. But there are also proposals in a number of different countries. The gentleman on my right of the podium is Mr. Vincent Delbos. He comes from the French National Preventive Mechanism, the General Controller for Inspection of all places of deprivation of liberty. The French NPM is a very interesting example because it's one of the few examples within the European Union where a new body has been created which is actually operating. Now, I'm not going to steal Mr. Delbos's fire. I'll let him tell you what the institution is and how they're operating. We go on to trend number 2. Countries which are using one or more existing bodies. Some of the examples we are in countries such as, not only European Union countries, but within Europe, countries such as Albania Armenia, Czech Republic, Estonia, Georgia, Luxembourg, Montenegro, Poland, Spain, etc., etc. It gives me great pleasure also to have invited a representative from the Czech Republic, Marie Lukasova, who works for the Public Defender's Office. Marie will tell you a little bit about the work of this institution within this session. This has often seemed to be a very logical approach. I mean, if you have something which you believe is working already, why create an additional body? The logic is it's much organisationally and financially cheaper to use an existing body. The argument continues that you avoid duplication. Why have 2 or 3 bodies doing the same thing? But the question you also have to keep in mind, is this approach as entirely non-problematic as we think it is? And perhaps I won't give you the answer to that question, but we can discuss it a little bit later on. In your delegates' packs, you will have the Turkish translation of this APT paper, National Human Rights Commissions and Ombudspersons as National Preventive Mechanisms. And in this paper, we've tried to undertake a fair analysis of both the strengths and the weaknesses of national human rights institutions as NPMs. The third approach is national human rights institutions and civil society working together as a national preventive mechanism. At the moment, we have functioning or semi-functioning models in Denmark, Moldova, and Slovenia. But there are a number of proposals in other countries. Argentina, Brazil, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Macedonia, and Paraguay. And we can go into greater depth later if these examples interest you. I mean, there are certainly some advantages, very clear advantages of about this type of cooperation. In a society, this sort of coordinated approach, you're using all the existing available resources you have in your society, both human resources, expertise, and also financial resources. This approach is often said to be very open and inclusive. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket. You're bringing in various actors to do the monitoring work. And in doing so, it can be argued that it instills greater legitimacy and independence on the final national preventive mechanism. But just in the same way that using a national human rights institution has its challenges, this hybrid approach also has its challenges, which we can talk about during this session. Some of you may have taken part in the European Commission's conference on the optional protocol in May last year. For those of you who did, you'll remember we had a representative from Slovenia who talked about how that mechanism was working. Another example we have is Denmark, where we have 3 different organizations working together to act as a national preventive mechanism. We have the Ombudsman's Office, the Danish Institute for Human Rights, which is a type of academic, very well-known international academic body, but working together with a national NGO, the Rehabilitation and Research Centre for Torture Victims. And each of the 3 organisations brings something to the monitoring. The NGO has a great deal of expertise in the domain of documenting medically ill treatment and torture. So it brings its medical expertise to the monitoring. The Danish Institute for Human Rights has expertise in international human rights law, and this is what it brings to the monitoring. And the Ombudsperson's Office as well, as a monitoring body, brings its experience to the overall work. I also mentioned there are a number of countries which don't readily fall into these three categories. And I think the UK model would be the prime example within the European Union. The United Kingdom designated earlier this year 18 existing bodies as its national preventive mechanism. You probably wonder, well, if you have 18 different bodies, how are you going to coordinate all of the work? Well, that job's been given to one of these bodies, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons for England and Wales. And I'm very pleased to have a representative from this coordinating body, Sean Sullivan. Not only does Sean's institution have the function of coordinating all of this, and Sean may be able to tell you how he thinks it may be done, but also within England and Wales, the main mechanism which monitors prisons is Sean's mechanism. In addition, Her Majesty's Inspectorate monitors a number of other detention settings, such as immigration removal centres. And it's begun in the last year or so to monitor places of police detention. And this is currently Sean's speciality. Anyway, I hope I've set the scene for this morning's discussions. Again, when we're looking at Turkey's future national preventive mechanism, we need to keep all these different attributes in mind: independence, resources, expertise, etc. All these elements which were mentioned earlier today. So what I'd like to do now is move over to the more detailed presentations. And we'll start this morning in Prague. Our second speaker from Prague. Well, we're not, because the institution is actually based in Brno, another city in the country. And it gives me pleasure to introduce Marie Lukasova, who will tell you about her work. Give me one moment.
Good morning to everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Maria Lukasova. I'm a lawyer and I work for the Czech Ombudsman, the public defender of rights. My position is a member of a detention department. I'm working there from the very beginning of these competencies as a national preventive mechanism, and I really appreciate that I had the chance to be involved in discussing and creating methodology before first visits have been carried out. I had the chance to witness establishing the national preventive mechanism in the Czech Republic. The process was quite exciting, and I must say the discussion about the way of operating the visits and national preventive mechanism is still open. We are still reflecting our role and position as the NPM. Recalling the situation of the Czech Ombudsman for 4 years ago, I'll try and give you briefly our experiences. Ombudsman was established in the end of year 2000 by the law from 1999. The original agenda of Ombudsman is to handle of complaints from citizens or individuals, of conduct of administrative bodies and some other institutions, as we know as Ombudsman competencies. The Ombudsman is responsible only to the Parliament, who also appoints him for a term of 6 years. I would like to recommend that the Czech Republic has 10 million inhabitants, 14 regions, and only one ombudsman with a deputy. I'd like to comment also that the Czech Republic has in its recent history a really dark period in 14th and 50s of 20th century, when the torture was a reality, now documented reality in prisons, police cells. It remains a sad memento for us. Now, 20 years after 1989, we don't deal with the problem of torture, but standards of security, of respecting rights of detained people, and standards for living in institutions like social care homes or psychiatric hospitals. The ratification of OPCAT provoked the debate about the form of the national preventive mechanism in the Czech Republic. The chosen variant was of establishing a new power for existing ombudsman. The Ombudsman Act was therefore amended and became law in the beginning of 2006. The Act stipulates the task to visit all places where persons are or may be restricted in their freedom. And why Ombudsman, public defender of rights, already had institutional and financial independence, has previous experience with several types of detention places, and the person of Ombudsman had and still has a real authority in our society. Great, Martin. It is explicitly said by law that the restriction must be understood de jure and also de facto. De jure means by a ruling or order of public authority, like in prisons, police cells, protective or institution care detention for foreigners, mental homes, and so on. Detention de facto means through the dependence on care provided, like in social care homes, hospitals. Visits of both types of facilities are carried out. Up to the present day, all main types of them had been visited by Ombudsman. The law stipulates the aim of visits to reinforce the protection against torture, cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment and other mistreatment. The Ombudsman is interpreting the word mistreatment with respect to the nature of detention. It's not only the torture and so on. He is interpreting the word mistreatment also as disrespect for persons and their rights, as disrespect for their social autonomy, privacy, or right to participate in the process of making decisions that affect them, a misuse of dependence on care provided, or intensification of such dependence. Considering the form of mistreatment, we have reached this list. Firstly, infringing fundamental human rights guaranteed by international treaties. Secondly, breaking national laws and regulations. Thirdly, failure to fulfill more or less binding instructions, directions or treatment standards, good practice or professional rules for procedure. Now let us focus on the powers of Ombudsman with respect to the operating of detention agenda. After a visit is carried out, a report on the findings is delivered to the head of the facility with recommendations or proposals for remedial measures. If the facility respects the recommendations, the file is closed. If not, sanctions are considered to impose, but it's really not a common situation. After finishing a planned period of visits, general issues, findings, and recommendations are summoned in a general report. The detention department of Ombudsman's office has 6 lawyers for operating visits itself, and another 6 to cooperate, but mostly they deal with the complaints of citizens. If needed and suitable, ad hoc experts are contracted, doctors, pedagogues, psychiatrists, and so on. The visits are systematic because for a specific period of time, the plan on visits is prepared. Ombudsman chooses types of facilities according to many factors, and all places to be visited are chosen forwardly. More about it later. Ombudsman Act stipulates the inspection powers. Enter all areas, premises of the facility without prior notification of the visit. Inspect all the files, including medical reports. Question employees and also interview detained persons. All these powers are exercised in reality. The representatives of Ombudsman don't undergo security examinations, for example, in prisons. We keep our mobile phones. We take pictures of furniture and material conditions. We acquire access to all premises and really interview chosen persons without presence of third parties. Back to the choice of facility. The choice depends on previous ombudsman's experience, references obtained from the public or inmates themselves, on results of previous inspection instruments, geographical criteria, and we have the aim to visit various founders, state facilities, regional, private, the attribute of detention. Due to the type of facility, the number of visits is decided to get representative data. More about it later. Visits of each type of facility involve detailed preparation, studying of current situation and actual problems, legal background, studying standards of care and treatment, abroad experiences. We also undergo training by experts if needed. The visit itself lasts 1, 2, or 3 days. Our experience is that further announcement affects the findings. So we risk call to welcome and prefer authentic first impression. After a short introduction to the director, we quickly view the facility and plan the course of inspection itself. We choose which employees and inmates to interview. And to cover all prepared topics, we create narrowly tailored questionnaires and ask more or less the questions prepared in advance. The evaluation of inspected reality is a team task after finishing the visit back in the office. Firstly, we test the findings by hard law, by applicable law. Then, in the light of so-called soft law and the human dignity point of view. We very often work with decisions of European Court of Human Rights, CPT standards of treatment, and interpretation of fundamental rights and freedoms. Especially for de facto facilities, Ombudsman is so far in the Czech Republic the first authority who formulates legal evaluation of many aspects. I've already mentioned true authority of the person of current Czech Ombudsman. He stays for years among the most popular politicians in the Czech Republic. As far as the institution is concerned, Ombudsman has a separate independent chapter in the state budget. He is responsible to Parliament only, not to government. And the professional confidentiality of the staff is required by law. The general reports are available to public via internet and are introduced to press. I'm talking about general findings with anonymization, not about findings from concrete facilities, because the report after certain visits is communicated only with the facility to some point of time, not with public. I'm sorry to say that we have not translations so far, so I can provide you in English only the example of annual report. It covers all agenda of Public Defender of Rights. And I have also an example of visit report in English and a follow-up visit report here. So if somebody would like to look at it. Representatives of Ombudsman also shared experiences on seminars, meeting with professionals and representatives of state administration. I have some numbers for you now. You can see it on the screen. The first is statistic for 2006. These systematic visits had been carried out. We started with police cells. It counted 110 police cells in 19 police stations. Then 4 detention centers for foreigners. Now I'm reading it from the screen, so You can go through it with me. 7 prisons, 4 institutions, prisons of the most severe type with life sentence. 4 institutions for protective education, 5 social care facilities, and 5 hospitals for long-term patients. Now I'm also reading it, so. In 2007 we visited 27 homes for the elderly, 2 reception centers for asylum seekers, and we also started with follow-up visits. So returning on the places where we perceive the situation so specific to follow-up visit. 2 social service center facilities, 5 police stations, 2 detention centers for foreigners, 2 hospitals for long-term patients, and 3 prisons. In 2008, we were so brave to go to psychiatric hospitals, which is really topic in the Czech Republic. So 8 psychiatric hospitals, it counted about 30 wards, 16 homes for elderly. These visits were focused on financial aspects of provision of social services, and also 8 follow-up visits in homes for elderly and in private homes for elderly. National preventive mechanisms activity in this year is not still finished. We have already visited 25 homes for mentally handicapped people, which summary had been presented to public last week. We are carrying on follow-up visits to 6 psychiatric hospitals, and newly we are visiting 9 pre-trial prisons. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome your comments or questions. As far as I am aware of the topic, I'm ready to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. Very interesting. I have a personal interest in the Czech Republic because 6 years ago, when I started working for the APT, my very first seminar was in Prague, and the discussions we have today were the ones we were having in Prague 6 years ago. So it's very interesting to see how these initial discussions have moved on, and there's now an MPM and it's doing its monitoring. And also what I find particularly interesting about the Czech example is, rather than just to continue business as usual, to monitor like they were previously, they've thought about their function as a national preventive mechanism and how they should function differently. So that is, of course, is very interesting. But before we take questions, what I'd like to do is invite Mr. Vincent Delbot to the podium and give us more information about the French example. I'll just put your slide on.
Thank you and good morning. First of all, I would thank our Turkish colleagues and the ability to organize such a conference, such a workshop, because I think I talk a little bit about that after. It's very interesting to have some exchange of experience in the beginning of the stage of this new institution that are NPM. Secondly, I would introduce myself. I'm a controller at the Contrôle Général des lieux de privation de liberté, which can be translated as a General Inspectorate of Place, which receive people who are deprived of liberty. And formerly I was a judge with experience in crime prevention, but also correctional services. And just before becoming controller, I was in the Ministry of Justice in the Department of Internal Affairs. And I made some comments about the distinction between control and inspection, and because I think it's a very important question. To present my institution, my organization, I would say first that we have a traditional framework, which is at the beginning a top-down approach, and we are now, after 1 year of experience, which is a very short one, trying to have a bottom-up approach in the framework of the law. TTLPR is an independent public body settled by a national law, and it's a French national mechanism from the OPCAT. The choice was clearly made in France that we have to create a new department, a new body, not to have a department of existing institutions, as Matthew said before. We had this discussion before the adoption of the law of 2007, and we have now also this discussion because there is a revision of the national constitution in France, which introduced a national défenseur des droits, national body who defends rights. And we are not in the field of this new institution because, and that's the central notion, we are an institution of control, and the defender of rights is an institution of mediation. And that's a difference, and I think a very important difference between the situation in which we could be in the institutional context of France, in the area of a mediator or ombudsman or defender of rights, and the situation of a specific independent body. The mission of the CGLPL is to take care in the respect of fundamental rights for people who are deprived of liberty, but at the application of the OPCAT. I would give you some elements about our fields of competence. In our field of competence, we have various kinds of places. First, places which are under the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice. It's various types of prisons, maisons d'arrêt, where people are in jail before the trials, and those who are under a less than 1 year sentence. These kind of prisons are very overcrowded in France, and the situation of rights of people who are deprived of liberty there are very critical. Other kind of prisons, places and prisons for minors, also what we call dépôt des tribunaux. I don't know how to translate that in English, but that's a place in the courts where people who are arrested wait before they are brought at a judge. And France was condemned by the European Court of Human Rights about this situation because in some place, in Paris for example, there was a situation in which people after a time in custody place wait for 24 hours before they be presented to a judge. Also, other places where people are deprived of freedom, but which are not under a unique responsibility of a ministry. First, that's place of custody or customs detentions in police station and gendarmerie, because as well as in Turkey we have a gendarmerie, and but I understand that's more or less the same situation. In urban area it's responsibility of police and you have police station, and in rural areas you have the gendarmerie. Center for immigrants, but also vehicles which are used to transport people deprived of freedom from a place to another. And this is a critical question also, especially for Center for Immigrants, in which you have all over France 28 centers for immigrants, but immigrants who are arrested are coming from all over France, and the time between their arrestation and the time they are in the center is a time in which their rights must be respected. And the third category is hospitals where people are without their consent. That means psychiatric hospitals, places where people are with disability in mental health. And that's not on the slide, but I would introduce 3 dots, because the law, and that's very important, did not define all the place where we are able to go. That's a large definition, places where people are deprived of liberty with an order of a public authority. So it's a very wide field. CGLPL is a team consisted of the Controller General, my boss, Jean-Marie Delarue, who was appointed for a 6 years mandate by a rule of the President of Republic, but with a special proceeding, which is now the ordinary proceeding to nominate people in public administration, which was not the case when he was nominated, when he was appointed. He was appointed after a discussion on the 2 parliamentary assembly. there was a debate, there was a proposal of the government to the chairman of the National Assembly and the Senate, and two debates with the committee, and an approval of the Parliament to this proposal, and after there was the rule of the President of the Republic. And it's a guarantee of independence. The Controller General cannot receive any instruction from any authority. He is nominated for 6 years, but he cannot be removed. He cannot be prosecuted for his opinions he formulates or for the actions he carries out in his functions. This point is very, very central in our action. He is not allowed to carry out any other duties or elected mandates. The Controller General is helped by an experienced and multidisciplinary team, which is made up of a General Secretary, 12 full-time appointed controllers, 9 part-time controllers who give their expertise to the job, and 4 assistants in charge of management. All the controllers are coming from various administration and NGOs, and we are, I said, was a judge. I have a colleague who was a prosecutor, 2 physicians, 2 people coming from the police administration, and 1 from the gendarmerie. From NGO, I said, from the management of hospital also. We have a colleague who is a former manager of a psychiatric hospital. And this multidisciplinary team is a key choice at the beginning of the NPM, to have various competences, and I explain more about some elements of methodology, some key elements of our methodology, but that's a mix of experience and expertise, which I think is very well functioning, because we are coming with a white sheet at the beginning, and we have together to write something on this white sheet. The Controller General and all the team are compelled to professional secrecy, and we are also bounded by an absolute duty of impartiality. Our tasks are very various. Visits of places where it's possible to interview all the people who are there confidentially. CGLPL is entitled to investigate, and we have 3 main tasks. First, to make sure that sacred rights which are inherent in human dignity are enforced. Second, to make sure that a good balance is established between fundamental rights, enforcement of people who are deprived of freedom, and observation on public order and security. And finally, and especially, to prevent any violation of their fundamental rights. A key question is to make a balance between the fundamental rights of people who are deprived of liberty and people who are working in this place and to make any time explanation that it's not a defense of fundamental rights against people who are working there. Because if we do not make this balance, if what we see is that when the working conditions of people who are in charge of this institution, on these places, are bad, anytime we have bad or weak respect of fundamental rights. And if we want to prevent violations of fundamental rights, we need to have a special interest to working conditions of people who are in charge of guard, generally speaking. The Contrôleur Général voices recommendations but cannot give any order to the executive branch. These recommendations are public. They are published in the official newspaper of the French Republic, but also in the media. He published also a yearly public report, which is given to the Parliament and the President of the Republic. And there was discussion 2 weeks ago at the Parliament about a new law on penitentiary rules, and all the elements of this report were taken to the debate at the Parliament. The TGLPR may be referred by anybody who wishes to inform on state which undermines fundamental rights of people who are deprived of freedom and related to the management of a place, to the behavior of staff or other deprived of freedom people. The Contrôleur Général des lieux de privation de liberté can be directly referred by those interested, people who are deprived of freedom, their relatives, their families, their advocates, staff, and everybody who works in this place. We have a small administrative office which is in charge to treat a lot of mails we received from people, especially people who are prisoners. NGO also, or any other organizations who are in charge of protecting fundamental rights, can refer directly to the Contrôleur Général. And the Contrôleur Général may also self-referred. And at the beginning, we work only on self-reference. As I explained at the beginning, we are just at the beginning of our experience, and we have at this time visited 150 places. Here there is just a percentage. The main part are prisons. The second part are custody places. The number of places which are under our field of competence are around 6,000 all over France. But number of crucial places are more or less 600. Why there is this difference? It's difference because we have in France a lot of places, small places, especially in rural areas, where there is one or two custody places in gendarmerie stations. Our aim is to control 150 places a year, and at this time we are in the target. What kind of report we produced? We produced first, just after the visit, a report of constatation, which is given to the responsible of the place to have an report with no discussion on the facts we have constated. Secondly, we made a report of the visit with some observation which is given to the ministry, which is in charge of the place. And the ministry has the time to to make an answer to this report. Sometimes it's maybe 2 or 3 ministers who received this report. For example, in prisons, prisons are under the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice, but there is also questions about health in prison, and health is not under the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice, but under the responsibility of the Ministry for Health, for Public Health, and we give the report, the visit report, to this ministry with the time to answer. And we have a small number at this time of public recommendation. It's more or less 10 at this time. The last picture is about the time between the visit and the public observation. It's 160 days between the visit and the publication of a recommendation. It's a very long time. We think it's a very long time, and we have to reduce it to have some more efficiency. We have published some recommendation, and I invite you to consult our website, which is in France, but there is a part in English, and because we have not the experience of our Czech colleague, we have not at this time made all the report or sum up of the report with a translation in other languages. Recommendations we have published are about a place for a center for foreigners, a prison, an hospital, a psychiatric hospital, a custody place, and the last was places in a court, as I explained before, where people are placed before they are coming to a judge. We are introducing also advice, and in the next few days Jean-Marie Delaris, Contrôleur Général, will publish an advice on how prisoner have to write to authorities. Because that's an element, a key element we find during our visit is that there is a rule of secret mail addressed to a list of authorities. A prisoner can write to his lawyer, to judges, to a general prosecutor, to ourselves, to the Control General, and to various authorities. But in fact, what we see is that secrecy is not well respected. And we are making an advice to the Ministry of Justice, but also to the executive branch to make a reform of this question. We published our first annual report on 2008. 3-4 months of activity. It was a very short time, but we think that it was very important at the beginning to have a first report to explain how the national mechanism in France was settled. And I have 3 or 4 samples of this report in French. I'm sorry. Thank you. In this report, we made some general comments on the rights to intimity, but also on a question which is very critical in France, is a register in custody places. What we see during our first visits in a country in which there is a very long tradition of in the administration writing all the elements. And there was a register in custody places, but this register were not very well informed. And we make some elements of diagnostic, but also some recommendations in this report to improve the ways in which this register can be informed. Some elements about our methodology. First, the Controller General freely chooses places where he or his team will make controls. And an element is that the Controller General himself made each time we have scheduled a visit, 1 or 2 visits with us. It's not only the team who make the visit, but also the Controller General. Visits can be scheduled, and in this situation the head of the controlled place is advised a few days before, or unexpected. Authorities, just a point, unexpected visit, all the custody places are unexpected, and after 1 year that's a rule. Other places, it depends. It depends on the elements we have before the visit. Choose a scheduled or unexpected visit. A Authorities cannot be against a visit apart from serious reasons such as national security, natural disasters or troubles in the visited place. We have an example of snowstorm last winter in which it was impossible to go in a prison, and we make the visit 1 week after. The Consul General can obtain any information or file which are necessary to his task, with a few exceptions, which is national security secret in judicial inquiries, or between an advocate and his client, and also medical secret. We have made sheets with a lot of points of control. We need to control when we make the visit for different kind of places we are visiting. But generally speaking, we ask to have the communication of reports which are made in the place on the main incident that's cultural elements, in which we have an administration which is writing a lot. And when there is an incident, there is a problem, there is a report which is written. And when we arrive, unexpected or scheduled, we ask first to have all the reports for the last 3 or 6 months, it depends, on what was written to the hierarchical authority about the main incidents or the main problems in the area, in the place. And which is now more or less a rule, we have contact with judicial authority, and especially with the prosecutor, to have a view of what kind of judicial inquiries are in place about the place we are visiting. I think that's what I'm just explaining. Finally, I will make some short comments. I can come back about elements with the relation with judicial inquiry. That's the final point on the PowerPoint. It's the use of disposition in the French Penal Code, which make an obligation to all public authority who is informed of crime to make an information to judicial authority. I think more or less there is the same. We use very moderately of this possibility, which is in the law, but we use it. We use it. We have used it 2-3 times for cases in which there was a very hard violation of fundamental rights, which can have a criminal definition. As a conclusion, I will make some very short comments. First, there is a very small road to build between concepts like inspection, investigation, and visits. And we make visits. We not make inspection. And I think that's very different because we need to be during the visit in the bath of the place, and we need to have informations from various sources, from people and from people who are deprived of liberty, but also from people who are in the position of the guard. And if we are in the position of inspection, the first reaction is for the guard that we are here to criticize what they are doing. And we think that we are in a preventing mechanism. And in preventing mechanism, there is a very strong effort of education to do to all the people, and to have a lot of information that we have to cross from various sources. Investigation is a judicial matter, and sometimes it's very difficult to stop in visit what we are doing, because we are not investigators. We have to make a constatation of objective facts, and we have to relate them. The job of investigation is for other authorities, and that's why there is this Article 40. Second, final element is, after our short experience, it's not a new proceeding we have, it's a process. And it's a process which is now in the phase of building. And at this time, we are not no more. It's a new institution, and that's very well. We are in the phase of it's a fight, and a permanent fight to convince that we may have some effects on the defense of fundamental rights. Third, we have a need of strong confidence with NGO, with people who are deprived of liberty when we arrived in a place, and also to have a clear share of competence with other independent authorities. We have a defender of rights of children, in which we have to combine our intervention. We have an independent authority on the question of deontology for security force. We have also to combine our intervention. And thirdly, we have also to combine what we are doing with a special authority which was built up against discrimination. With these three independent bodies, we have made convention agreements to write what we are doing and to define exchange of information. Fourth, we have to build strong relationship with ministry. Relationship is not partnership. And I think it's very important to stay in our place as an independent organization, an independent body. We are there to improve the situation, but we are not in a partnership with ministry. And there is a very strong trend for ministers to say, okay, you point this subject, we are making a committee, come in this committee, and we are joining our efforts to produce new elements. Finally, and that's the fifth and last point, we have a need also of exchange of experience, and I think that in the situation of a new mechanism like we have in France, we have built up some relations with SPT, but also with the CPT and also with the European Court of Human Rights. And also we have the need of relations with other NPM. And I would again thanks APT and our Turkish colleague to have this meeting, which is a very important occasion to meet other colleagues. The last point is that if you have any interest about what I explained, Jean-Marie Delarue, the Controller General, said that our Turkish colleagues are welcome in France if you want to have some more explanation about what we are doing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much indeed. For a small team of 20 so people, it's quite impressive that you're managing to do 150 visits a year. So I'm sure you're all extremely busy, and I just hope your families see you from time to time. Questions for our two first speakers, please? Any questions? Karen, please.
Benim çok sayıda sorun var. Onun için Matthew istediği zaman kesebilir. Şimdi sabahki oturumu yöneten Cem Erol bundan 15 sene önce sanıyorum bir oturumda işkenceyi önlemek için böyle bir ziyaret yöntemi önermişti ama buradaki konuşmalarda dinlediğimde acaba onun önerdiği aynı şey mi diye düşünüyorum. Çünkü o baskın ziyaretlerden bahsediyordu. Yoğun işkencenin yaşandığı bir dönem olmasından belki yola çıkarak. Ama merak ettiğim bu habersiz ziyaret hiç baskın ziyarete döndü mü sizin deneyimlerinizde? 24 saat ulaşılabilir bir mekanizma mıdır bu? Yani bir avukat, ki burada avukat arkadaşlar da var, ulusal mekanizma, imdat dediğinde baskın verebiliyor musunuz? İkinci ve bununla bağlantılı sorum şu. Ben bu konuyla ilgili çalışırken burada da temsilcisi var sanıyorum, cezaevi izleme kurulları meselesine de bakmıştım. O zaman Adalet Bakanlığı'nda ilgili daire başkanıyla konuştum. Şöyle bir soru sormuştum. Kaç tane işkence kötü muamele iddiası aldınız diye. Aslında biraz gururla 2 tane aldıklarını söylediler. Ben bunu aslında problemli görmüştüm. Yani yapıldığından dolayı değil, ben de gördüğüm için söylemiyorum ama Türkiye gibi büyük bir ülkede 2 tane başvuru almanız size güvenin olup olmadığı konusunda soru işaretleri yaratır. Deneyiminiz az olmasına rağmen siz kaç tane bu türde şikayet aldınız? Ve bu şikayetlerin aslında Fransa'da bir prosese koyulduğunu gördük ama hiç işkence, kötü muamele sonucuna ulaşılan bir vaka var mı? Yani bu ihbar meselesi ne kadar gerçekten hayata geçirilebilir bir meseledir. Her iki konuşmacı içinde, şimdi biz yarın ve aslında bugün de konuşacağız Türkiye'yi. Türkiye'de on binlerce izleme yapan insan var. İl ilçe kurulları ve cezaevi izleme kurullarını düşünürsek gerçekten on binlerle ifade ediliyor. Eski İnsan Hakları Başkanı ordu diye ifade etmişti hatırlarsanız. Şimdi siz bir yanda 6, öbür yanda 20 kişi. İlkinin çok ciddi problemler yarattığını biliyoruz. Ben öğleden sonra bahsetmeye çalışacağım ama acaba şimdi düşünüyorum 6 kişi Türkiye'de nereye ne kadar yetebilir? Bu durumda hızlı gitmiyorum inşallah çevirmen için. Bu durumda sizle beraber çalışan mesela Çek kamu denetçisi için ad hoc uzmanların önemi artıyor. Ama sabah konuştuğumuz dokunulmazlıklar ve diğer güvenceler ne kadar geçerli bunlar için ve onlar nasıl seçiliyor konusu ayrıca bir önem arz ediyor. Sayın Delbo'nun aktardığına göre de sizin kurumunuzda polisler, cezaevi müdürleri ve NGO'lar var. Ama nasıl seçiliyorlar ve oranları ne? Eğer %10 NGO, işte %90 polis cezaevi ise muhtemelen burada bizdeki insan hakları örgütleri çok ciddi soru işaretleriyle yaklaşacaklardır. Bu böyle. Bir diğer sorum şu, dediğim gibi çok sorum var ama herhalde hepsi de ilgili. Şimdi Cumhurbaşkanı'nın seçtiği bir kişi nasıl bağımsız olur sorusu Türkiye'de çok önemlidir. YÖK Başkanı'nı Cumhurbaşkanı seçer. Türkiye'de 115 tane üniversite 2 senede içerisinde tamamen yapı değiştirir. Görevden de alamasın isterse. Gerçekten ne kadar bağımsız olduğunu siz deneyimlerinizden yola mı çıkıyorsunuz? Yani Sarkozy mesela sol eğilimli birisini acaba bu kurumun başına getirir ve ondan sonra bağımsız davranmasını sağlar mı? Ve nihayet tavsiyelerden bahsedildi. Tavsiye adı üstünde tavsiye, uyulması zorunlu değil ama çok vahim bir şeye uyulmadığı zaman ne yapabilir? Bu kurum afişe mi gidecek? Basına mı verecek? Basın toplantısı mı yapacak? Çok soru sordum biliyorum ama bir kısmına cevap alabilirsem sevinirim.
There's a lot to think about, please. And Sean, if you wish to comment on anything that's been said, please feel free to do so.
First, on unexpected visit at any time. We arrived in the afternoon, in the night, in the morning, during the weekend. And what we see now is that in the police station there is an information from the central police administration which said, take care, the Controller General can come at any time. No. The message is okay at this time. We are able to go at any time in any places. Number of allegations. What I can say is that there is at this time more than 1,000 letters indicating elements about bad treatment. Coming at 80% from prisoners. The rest is from custody station and also from psychiatric hospital, which is a category of letter which is very quickly increasing. Third is about composition of the team. 2 members of NGOs. There was a lot of application when the institution was created, and Jean-Marie Delarue, the Controller General, decided alone to build up a team which is representative of places where we were going. We have in the permanent team two of my colleagues who are coming from NGO, but we have also 8-9 colleagues who are part-time, and we have there two who are coming from NGO. I don't know if that's a good proportion between people coming from the management of prisons, from police, or from justice, or for physicians, but that's a compromise with a small team. The fifth question about the nomination. The Contrôleur Général was before a judge at the Council of State, and he was vice president of the court where he made urgent trial. He judged a lot of urgent proceeding, and he is respected as a judge at the National Council of State. In his background, he was an advisor of Jacques Delors, who is not exactly in the same wing that Mr. Sarkozy, and that's elements of his independence, I think. You have a question on the follow-up and the recommendation. On the follow-up, it's too short to have clear elements about that, but in two cases we had made a follow-up of a visit. The first one, it was in a police station in which when we sent the first report to the police authority, they said you have made a mistake on some elements, and we were sure that we had not made a mistake, so we go back to make a second control on the point in which there was contestation. And as you imagine, when we go back, it was not very pleasant for the police station, and here also there was a message to all the police stations that their interest is not to lie when they present some elements. The second follow-up was in a prison in which the Minister of Justice said, okay, you have made some observation and there is necessary to have works. These works are done now. We received this answer, but we have other information that these works were not made. We go back and we make a public information about that. And that's, I think, your final question. There is formal publication of recommendations, but we have also the Contrôleur Général have a frequent meeting with the press, and that's a strong support also to our job, that we have a sensibility in the French media about these subjects, and we have clear answer by the written or podcast media when there is a publication about a subject, that there is information and a large information about what we are doing.
Marie, would you like to comment? Sean?
Matty, I think it's quite late in the day. I can quite easily sort of throw some of those issues into my presentation so that, hopefully I can clarify what's happening in the UK with regard to some of those issues. So in an effort to save a little bit of time, if you're happy for me to do it that way, then I'm happy with that.
What I suggest, I'm standing up here and I see a lot of hungry faces. What I'm going to suggest, and if you think I'm being authoritarian, please shout me down. But I would suggest we go for lunch, we revitalize ourselves and fill our energy up to here. We will continue this session after lunch. Sean has already agreed to speak after lunch, and we can continue this session. We do have time in the afternoon because in theory I am supposed to be talking, but I'm happy to give up my presentation so we can all go and have something to eat. So what I would ask you, ladies and gentlemen, if you could come back please at 2:20, and we'll continue this interesting discussion. There'll be more time for questions. Would you agree with that proposal? Wonderful, thank you.